Hey everybody, I think we are live here. I lost my look at my screen, so I'm going to assume we are live. Good afternoon, evening. It is Sunday, the 29th of June. We've got one day left in this quarter, and it's been a wild one. Let's take a look at the futures, just because that's always a good idea to start out the evenings. Let's see, screen, share window, where are you? There we go. Okay, so it's Sunday evening, June 29th, and the futures are currently higher here. On the right, we have a 2-minute chart of the S&P 500 futures. You can see we gapped up a little bit, kind of wiggled around that volume weighted average price for the session, and we've had a nice rally so far. The NASDAQ, same story. It's testing the anchor for the new session. This is the session, and of course, week to date volume weighted average price. Below that, we have the anchor off of Friday afternoon's low. I think that's an important level. So if we see some fade of this strength overnight, and if you're one of the pajama traders, I would say keep an eye on this anchor. That brings you down to about 62.12. Most of you, I don't think, are overnight futures traders. So, last Sunday, I was just asked, a little bit ago, a neighbor of mine asked me, said, hey, what's the news looking like? Anything, big happen over the weekend that's likely to move the markets? And I said, it's not really such a big concern of mine. If you think back to where we were 1 week ago, exactly, we were right here in oil, right here. That's exactly where we're at $78 a barrel in oil. Right now, oil is currently down a dollar, or I'm sorry, 1%, and we have dropped from 78 down to 65. I mean, incredible uh, move off that news of a bombing, right? So, the futures were lower, but they were climbing right at that moment. So always have to take, if you always have to be aware of all the information that has the potential to move the markets, but you have to look at it and say, how much does it matter? Is it going to matter tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m.? Or, maybe you start your day at 7 a.m. Eastern time and you're, trading the stocks that are moving pre-market in that. I'm a swing trader. That's my focus. What we're going to do tonight, by the way, is a little bit different than what I've been doing. Taking kicker requests, that's great, and that helps one or two people who are interested in that symbol. But what's more interesting, I think, to most people is what are the bigger stocks doing? What are some strategies and some education I can impart to you? Again, I've been doing this full time since 1991, and I feel I'm qualified to give you written a couple books about the stock market. And what we're going to talk about is, one, we can talk about the news and how the news doesn't matter really. I mean, you always have to take that for a grain of salt. What I mean to say is only price pays. If you're looking at, well, we're going to have all these tensions in the Mid East and that, last week the talk was they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Well, market doesn't care what they're talking about. The market cares about price action. By the way, oil, keep an eye on this level down here at about 64. We bounced from it perfectly so far. That's the anchor that we had from this low of the year. So that's an important level. What I want to talk about, though, as I mentioned, was some cryptos. So first up, Bitcoin. I had mentioned to subscribers of Alpha Trends last week, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday, that my crypto account for the first time in a while is 100% long. I added to some small core positions that I had, and I am fully involved. It looks to me like we have, well, we had spoken about this level here. Where's my drawing tool? We had spoken about this, I think, in the weekend video, that breaking beyond that. And we did break beyond that. That looks like a beautiful flagpole, flag, and break higher. It seems to me like we're headed for new all-time highs in Bitcoin. If we were to break below probably 106, really, then I would maybe decide, I think I have to lighten up a little bit. That's a little less than 2% stop. And it's not necessarily a stop. Ethereum, I also added to this. As you know, or if you don't know, I added some way down here as it came down to the anchor from the inception on Coinbase. So, that's something I've spoken about at length. Let's look at the weekly chart. That is the anchor from the inception on Coinbase, and we came down perfectly to it. I bought some not at that touch, but a couple days later, right in here, and my stop was below that. Now I've added back because we broke this big band of support and we came back up above it. So from failed moves often come fast moves. I'm looking, I don't have price targets on Bitcoin. Is my big, would it matter if I said my price target was a million or 250,000 or anything silly like that? My price target is always the same. It's higher. If I'm long, that's my price target, higher. What I focus on is risk management. If Ethereum breaks back below this low right in here, then I'm likely going to lighten up a little bit because my fear would be that we're back down underneath this level and it could see a bigger reversal. That's simply risk management. Solana, as I mentioned in the Friday video, this I was a little uncomfortable. Thought I added to it right over in here. I got a little bit antsy on the purchase and bought it early. I held it through this. I kind of felt stupid, truthfully, but as it recovered, I said, okay, now that's my stop. So between the three of them, I have 100% allocate. Actually, I have a very small piece of Ripple as well. But it's about 1.5% of my crypto account. So that's where we're looking at there. Let's do this now that we've spoken about crypto and the futures that are still holding the anchor from that move, and that's the beginning of the week. That's going to be the week to date volume weighted average price as well. Over on the left, by the way, of course, is the 1 hour chart, and we've got a rising 5-day moving average. So going into next week, we are innocent until proven guilty while we're above that. Let's take a look now at some equities. And what I wanted to talk about today was some IPOs because they're back in business. And did I share the weekly chart? That's not what I meant to share. Let me do that again. Let's see, screen. Actually, I have a couple of ticker requests from Alpha Trend subscribers, so I'm going to get to those first. Alpha Trend subscribers always get priority, so what we'll do is just look at a few of these tickers here real quick. And first one is Unity. Unity is something I've been talking about. It's just stuck in a range. It keeps getting these big moves higher. Three of them in here, and that's not the tool I meant to use. Now it looks like maybe it can get going above here. The problem is it just ran from if it were to make a higher low, then I think you could get involved with a stop under here. It's still a range bound stock, and when we look at the weekly chart as we did last week on Unity, we came up to the place where it's supposed to find supply. Prior support tends to become resistance. Now the good news is we came down to the conjunction of the 20, 31, and 42-week moving averages in here, and it seems to be finding buyers. We were up on big volume, pulled back on light volume, had a bigger volume stamp last week as it consolidated. So what I'd look for in here is maybe nibble above here if it gets above there, but my concern is that it does this and then create a higher low. Then I'd be interested in getting involved in Unity. But the bigger picture still says, be aware that another move up to that 28 level would be a nice level. It'd be a nice move, but will it have the energy to break past this prior big band of support? We'll see. I'm not going to make that prediction, but it's certainly something to be interested in. Someone wants to look at SAIL. We'll do that in a minute because that is a recent IPO as well. How about SERV? SERV, it's had trouble with the anchor from the election. That's the orange line, the year-to-date anchor. It's at the declining 20-day moving average. That 20-day moving average will be declining early next week as well. We're at this prior band of support that's acting as resistance. It doesn't look thrilling to me. Fubo, it's just run from 310 to 365, so it's just run 20%. Where has it come from? Well, it's rallied 20%. Where does it have the potential to go before it's likely to encounter a source of supply that might be strong enough to act as resistance? Same questions I reiterate every single week, and it's having a little trouble with the anchor from the election, but maybe it can continue up to the year-to-date anchor where it's had some trouble this year. If it's to rally up to there at about 390, Well, if you're going to buy it, where does your stop go? If you are comfortable buying a stock that's up 20% in the last week, then you know your risks. It's extended. It doesn't mean it can't continue to move higher, but Fubo is the type of stock that does have good runs. So I would say if you're going to get involved in it, know where your stop is below those lows right there. ADTN, this one, where did it just run into a supply? This prior support was at what? And that became resistance, and now it's back there again. So where has it come from? Adtran has just run from 7.5 to 9. That is again 20%. It's up. Is that right? No. Yeah, that's 20%. It just had a 20% run in the last week and a half. Where has it come from? 20%. Where does it have the potential to go that where it's likely a source of supply will be strong enough to act as resistance? Well, the anchor from the election was prior support very aggressively and then resistance once, and will it be again? And if it can get through there, then is it going to have trouble with the year-to-date anchor? Maybe it doesn't, but it seems like it's definitely not early on this stock. If you're going to get involved, I would say a stop goes under here. GSAT, this one, let me move this out of the way. This one has come from 18 to 24 during this month. Doesn't mean it can't continue to move higher, but 18 to 24, that's 8 points. So it's 8 into 18. That's 35%. That's a huge percentage of it. Is 40%. It's up 40% in the last month. It's got this little band of support. What I'd love to see is a shakeout below there. Then maybe it can tighten up and get ready to go. But again, you're not early to this. And when the market is rallying the way it has been, it's up on news of, we're in a runaway market mode. And what happens in runaway market mode to the average person? The average person starts to get cocky. They start to feel like they're really good and they can't lose money. I've been there too. I'm not making fun of anyone, trust me. I'm just looking at human nature. The S&P 500 up from 590 to 615. That's a big move in a short period of time for the S&P. It seems like it might need to consolidate a little bit, but the futures say the buyers are still in control, and that's great. But don't go for the extended stocks. Don't be looking at them unless you're going to be looking at them with really tight risk management. And what's your tight risk management? ADTN or GSAT. I think again, what you want to see is a shakeout first, because there's complacency in this market. Maybe it pulls back to the 20, consolidates a few days, and then it's able to get up to the anchor from the election. That's possible. ACHR, it's in a big choppy mess since this gap lower. The daily chart is a big choppy mess as well. I just don't see a low risk, high probability trade in here. Doesn't mean you can't make money in it, but I would look at it and say, if you're going to get involved, where does your stop go? Under one of these higher lows. We had this low, we had a higher low here, and we had another higher low. Manage risk first. Let the stock settle down. It's a disaster in here. It really is. Just how do you look at these things and manage risk? Micron kind of did what it was supposed to, in that it ran up prior to earnings. Earnings were released right here on this arrow, and it's consolidating a little bit. And it's holding on to the gains actually really well. So that's a good thing. When we look at a weekly chart on Micron, it's doubled here off the April lows, and that's great. But wouldn't it make more sense to see the stock come down into this zone maybe in the next few weeks? Doesn't mean it can't continue to move higher. But when you look at it and say, am I early to this stock? No. Where does it have the potential to go before it's likely to encounter supply? This prior little support, this prior resistance became support, and then it tagged it. And it had good news. News came at the end of this big rally. I think you want to let it settle down a little bit. Maybe it starts to get trapped underneath the 5-day moving average. I think it's a good stock to continue to keep an eye on. Maybe look for it to pull back to the anchor from this gap, maybe from this low. But it's starting to look a little distributive Here's the anchor for, I'm sorry, the high from the earnings. Then we had a lower high. Here's the low that day. Then we had a lower low. So it's just needing a little bit of time to correct. It's certainly, again, it's not early to the trend. Oscar is in a nice uptrend. It had news over here. And now what do we see? We see a big, big ranges that consolidate. Um, be careful getting involved in the open. I would say this is likely going to be an important higher low in here. So manage risk against that level. So good. I'm done with the ticker request. It's really the least favorite part of what I do here. And I'm going to start steering away from it because, again, a lot of people are asking the same types of questions all the time. And they are the stocks. I see it so often. For whatever reason, I didn't see one stock in there that looks like it's really kind of anticipatory. The type of stock you want to look at and say, okay, if it breaks beyond a level of supply. A stock like, what I posted on Twitter on a couple days ago, which is VEEV. I want to see the ones in here that are getting ready to go higher. I want to see the stocks like Fortinet that are consolidating and getting ready to go. I'm looking for Fortinet to do something like this. I don't want to look at Fortinet when it's over here. I don't want to look at Fortinet when it's over here. I want to look at it after it's consolidated. This is where the energy is built up. This is where it has the potential to launch the next move. Rally up, sucker people in above this little high right here, pull back, they spit it out, and then as it starts to rally again, buy here with a stop under there. As it breaks that high, raise your stop under here. Those are the types of trades that I really want to steer people towards. Now, let's talk about the stock du jour, which is Circle. And Circle Internet came public at $31 per share just a couple weeks ago. Now, it's been a huge rally. It's when we look at the 30, let's look at a 65, let's look at the 30-minute time frame here. So what I did in here, and I posted this at about this point on Friday as it was coming down. I said, be aware of this level of interest, which is two things. We have this is where the low of the stock's life is, and here's the all-time high. So when we do a Fibonacci retracement, we look at it and say, is the 38.2% retracement important? The market said no. Is the 50% retracement important? Doesn't really seem to be. It's a level of interest. Will it pull back down to the 61.8% retracement? Maybe, maybe not. Right now, it's up $2. It's at 182. It's basically at 183 right now. So it's due for a bounce. I think that it's the most important thing on here is we have the anchor from the IPO. And just like chase the gap or wait for VWAP, what is, if you're familiar with that? One, if you're not familiar with it, you should read my book, Maximum Trading Gains with Anchored VWAP. And what we're actually about to discuss, let me change this screen once again to another screen, which is, where are we? Hold for me, please. Is this the right one? Yeah. So this is from my book, Maximum Trading Gains with Anchored VWAP. IPO trades with the Anchored VWAP. So this is a chapter in my book, and it's started out. I started using the Anchored VWAP in 2007 with NetSuite, their IPO. But this lays out the strategy of on day one of an IPO, what you want to do is you want to set an anchor to the very first bar of the day. But you all, on a 1 minute chart, you also want to set it on the second minute because the second minute is when we have actual after market trading. It's not just that opening print with that massive volume. So in here, the purple was from the IPO itself. This was from the 2 minute. Now over a couple days later, this is the same stock. They're going to be in the same place because enough volume has built. So we want to look at it and say it gives us structure. So here's an IPO without an anchor. Here it is with the anchor. So that is Maximum Trading Gains with Anchored VWAP. If you're not familiar with the book, it's on Amazon. That actually, the version I was just showing you is an ebook on, I think, oh, that's Google Books, and I've also got it on Barnes and Noble. Let's go back to our charts and continue back with Circle, because what we see with Circle is now that we're, you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks into it, we look at it and say, what are the key points? Well, if we look at it from very similar to what I was saying, chase the gap or wait for VWAP. Well, we had a little bit of shakeout below the VWAP on day one. Then the buyers took control, and it was a nice pattern of higher highs and higher lows. And then we came down and touched the anchor from the VWAP. And then we had a nice little rally in here. And then we came back, closed on the anchor from the VWAP, and then this next move began. So this next move was important. And in fact, I had set an anchor there that, which when we look at that, you say, look at how, you know, that renewed move began, and then to buy the strength off of that with a stop under here. That's called a handoff, which is another chapter in the book. Anyways, what we see now is we have this stock below declining 5-day moving average. The 5-day moving average is way up here at 220, and we're at 180. That's that's 20% away. So a bounce can occur in here and be a very nice bounce. So I did buy a little bit of this on Friday. There's no evidence that the buyers are in control. This was kind of, I had set my anchor here. As it shook out below it, I bought right here on Friday. And it's a small amount, but it's enough to keep me interested. And I think I will be aggressive about this stock tomorrow as a day trade. So the thing is, tomorrow as a day trade, maybe it rallies all the way up, and maybe it does a little bit of this, and I will keep this anchor on there, and then I would add to it right here. And my objective, not my target, would be, I think it has the likelihood to come up to Friday's VWAP. That's what will be the 2-day volume weighted average price. That would be a really nice bounce. That would be a 12, 13 point bounce. If it got up through there and consolidated like this, well, then maybe it's going to run up to daily R2 or the 3-day VWAP. And what I would do is I would of course have Monday, tomorrow's VWAP would look like this as it starts to rally. And if it does this, that is, I would probably set one off the morning low as well, and it might end up that the shakeout off the morning low might be right here, because we do all the big volume right at the open. As it pulls back, gets back, holds this VWAP, gets back above the daily VWAP, I would be a buyer there, looking to sell some most likely up in here, or use the 2-minute exit. And it's a counter trend trade because it's below the declining 5-day moving average. But there's so much opportunity in a stock like this that for day trades, it can make a whole hell of a lot of sense. So when we look at this stock and we look at some other CoreWeave initially had some problems with the anchor from the IPO, and as it got back above it, what happened with CoreWeave? Well, we had this huge rally emerge from there. The buyers regained control right here. That's where they definitively regained control. The anchor from the volume weighted average price said on day 8, let's just call this 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, the sellers were in control. How do we know that? Because the price was below the average price that the public paid for this stock. It doesn't mean that everyone is losing money, but on balance, the after market, the after IPO, people were losing money in here. So at this point, that's where they 100% definitively regained control. We didn't have to wait for a new high to say the buyers are back in control. Once the buyers were back in control was when the average short seller was losing money, is when it got back above the anchor from the IPO. That's our objective measurement point that so many people are anchored to. So when it gets back above there, the buyers are in control. That's where the new move begins. Set an anchor to that, and look at how it cradled it right here and then continued to rally. Now, CoreWeave, it might be, needing a little bit of a shakeout. We could put an anchor, or we could maybe draw a trend line that looks like this, and maybe it's going to shake out a little bit. It's still holding a rising 20-day moving average, which is above a rising 50-day moving average, but the 5 is declining. So it's definitely not in a position where you want to be a buyer yet. And I wouldn't buy above Friday's high, because what would happen? That would mean it would have to rally from 159 to 167. It would have to rally 8 points. That's what, 6%. So do I want to buy after 6% move, or do I want to rally 6%, 7%, pull back, and then buy over here as it starts to show that this is potentially a new higher low? And at that point, the 5-day moving average might, oh, that's the wrong trend tool. The 5-day moving average, again, that's the wrong trend tool. 5-day moving average might start to look like this. So then we would have an anchor off the all-time high and say, from the all-time high, who has control, the buyers or the sellers? Right now, if we got a rally up towards that level, that would be right here at 170. So pull back. I'd love to see it rally to 170, pull back, start to move again, and set a stop under here. And who knows, maybe this is headed for 200. And a absolute worst case stop, I would never set a stop down here on a stock this volatile, would be down here. You have to keep in mind the average true range percentage is 10%. That means on average each day from high to low, there's a 10% move. If you're comfortable with those fluctuations after the stock has had this big of a rally, then by all means just buy it and hold it. I look at it and say, I need to manage risk much tighter than that. And if I can, let's say, buy right here on Tuesday or Wednesday with a stop under here, I would take a third off into strength. And then if it continued to make higher highs and higher lows, my price target wouldn't be 200. My price target would be higher. And I would listen to the message of the market. As long as it's making higher highs and higher lows, I would hold. But if it did this, I don't care about 200. I would say 178. That's where I'm out. That's the end of it for my time frame. And that would be a great swing trade. But I wouldn't be comfortable with it running up there and then seeing, what do we know? Well, on the average day, we have a 10% range. Maybe it's going to pull back 10%. I don't want to hold a stock down 18 points. That's 10% on this stock. So look at it in those terms. AIRO was a recent IPO. It came public at 10 bucks a share. Look at the anchor from the IPO. We had a little bit of trouble with it at first, and now what's happening here? The sellers are saying we're going to either short because it's overvalued up in there, or we're maybe building. So you look at this and say, what would you do with this stock? And I would say, I would watch it. I would watch it to do something like this. Ideally, if it's going to be a long again, maybe it breaks slightly above that VWAP, comes down, makes a higher low, maybe and even does this, rallies up, this anchor looks like this, and then guess what? I would want to be a buyer here. Worst case stop under here. As it starts to rally, I would take a third off into daily R2, and then I would raise my stop up under here. Risk management, that's what I'm always looking at. Sale was another stock that was asked about, and Sale was an IPO back in February. And what happened with Sale? Look at the anchor from the IPO. First it held as support, then as resistance, and then we gapped back above it. So that gap was a big change in the shift of the psychology of this stock. And what's happened since then? Has this anchor been very helpful to us? Maybe you bought above here with a stop under there, and then you raised your stop up under this, once we had the lower high, you raised your stop there and got stopped out. Then you felt stupid and chased it. Then it gapped down. You sold it and said, I'm done with this stock. That's the way it goes. This, if you're trying to trade this stock, look at the volatility and say, does this look like it's a trending stock? Over here, it kind of looked like it. The people who bought the breakout, they were good for a day and a half. Now it's pulling back. So when I look at this, I say, okay, let's look at the anchor from this gap. Is it helping us or hurting us? Realistically, it had some resistance here, support. Now, if it's going to act as resistance again, I would think it's likely to pull back down in towards the 20-day moving average in the anchor from the IPO again. We had a higher high. We had a higher low. It's getting messy up in here. I would look at this stock and say I'm simply not interested. CHYM is another recent IPO, and this one, maybe it gets a bounce up to the anchor from the IPO. That would get it up near 35. I'm looking at possibly trading this because it's above a rising 5-day moving average. It came public at $27 per share. It had great underwriters, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. So I'd hope to get through a lot more of these, but I think I will do that for Alpha Trend subscribers. Meanwhile, it's 6:30 here, and this is a half-hour show. So I hope you learned something from it. If you want to give me some feedback about the format of not just answering questions about individual stocks, and maybe next Sunday what we do is take some educational concept questions and answer those. Because again, just answering stocks about questions that have run 20% in the last week, I'm going to generally give the same answer. They can continue to move higher, but they're not most likely to. You're not early. Where has it come from? Where does it have the potential to go? Where's your risk? And again, that'll do it for me. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you have a good week, holiday shortened week of trading ahead. Friday the market's close. We have another 3-day weekend. Yay for that. Good night.